All right, if you can, go and grab your Bibles. Turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 8. I want to welcome our rising sixth graders with us here today. Sixth graders, how are we? Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's their first time here on Not a Family Sunday, so they've been promoted to the sixth grade, and so that means they're grown-ups now. They come to big church. And so guys, listen, you're going to need your Bible. If you got parents around your friends, they can help you find these places. I know Miss Carly has helped you greatly to find it. The first number is the chapter. It's the big number on your page, and the little number is the verse. The second number is the verse. So if I say Ecclesiastes 5, 5 is the big number, and then 8 is the small one. That's the verse we're going to go to. We're going to start there this morning. We're in a series called Chasing the Wind, where we're studying the book of Ecclesiastes. And last week I talked about how when you hear from the Lord, you have to obey him. That's the call, to listen and obey. And so throughout this week, I feel like the Lord was telling me something to do with this study. And I didn't want to do it because it meant we got to get to the next one earlier. But finally on Thursday, I became obedient. And so we've reoriented the book of Ecclesiastes, our study. We're going to finish this the first week of July. Then we'll start a new series July 14th, which is not, for me, it doesn't make sense to start a series on July 14th, but what do I know? I'm not in charge. God is. And so we're going to begin a new one July 14th, but we're going to condense some stuff. And so just so you know, it's a big chunk we're going to go through this morning. It all works together, so it's going to be better this way. I truly believe that as we do it together. We're going to read a lot. I'm going to ask you to stand. If you would, we stand. We're going to read the end of chapter 5 and all of chapter 6. So if you can't stand for that long, I understand. You may sit down. You're completely allowed to do that. But we're changing our pace up a bit. So here's a lot. It's a lot. I'm telling you it's a lot. But we're going to be okay. We're going to make it. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, beginning in verse 8. If you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, do not be amazed at the matter. For the high official is watched by a higher, and there are yet higher ones over them. But this is gain for a land in every way, a king committed to cultivated fields. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. When goods increase, they increase who eat them. And what advantage has their owner but to see them with his eyes? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. There's a grievous evil that I have seen under the sun. Riches were kept by their owner to his hurt, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. And he is the father of his son, but he has nothing in his hand. As he came from his mother's womb, he shall go again, naked as he came, and shall take nothing for his toil that he may carry away in his hand. This also is a grievous evil. Just as he came, so shall he go. And what gain is there to him who toils for the wind? Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, and much vexation and sickness and anger. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life God has given him. For this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun. It lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It's a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good. Do not all go to the same place? For the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after the wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and what is known, and it is known what man is, that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity. And what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. God, again, we come to you needing your help as we study your word today. You wrote it through your man here, through your Spirit, and so we need your Spirit to help us. Give us eyes to see, give us ears to hear, give us a heart soft enough to be shaped and molded by you this morning. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. You may be seated. On this screen now are scriptures I'm going to use this morning. We're going to do, again, that big chunk. We're going to spend a lot of time in Ecclesiastes. We're going to wander a bit into a few other places, but not for very long. So before we get into it, I want you to take a second. If you need to write this down, I want you to think through or write down the top 3 things you are worried about right now. Things that you're stressed out about, or when you get stressed, why do you? What are the top 3 or 4 things? And be honest, right? Don't give a churchy answer if you don't mean it. Honestly, like what stresses you out? What are you worried about? Write that down. Keep it in your mind. We're going to get to that just in a little bit here. As you're thinking about that, let me recap us of where we are. This book, Ecclesiastes, is unique. It's written by someone who has actually put together a series of, or maybe one gigantic lesson of someone that he calls the preacher. Hebrew is the Koheleth, the one who gathers. And we believe it's probably Solomon, the son of King David, who has written all of this, the wisest man who ever lived. He had asked for wisdom. We believe God gave him wisdom through experience. So it's the end of his life, and he's downloading all of this wisdom to us that we might learn from him and not have to walk through everything that he had to walk through to get there. But he's answering one question from Ecclesiastes 1, verse 3. What's the point? What does man gain from all the toil at which he toils under the sun? What do we get out of this? What's the advantage? Like, why at all? Why is there life at all? He's made the point, it seems like everything goes back to where it started. Even the rivers, they flow into the oceans, but the oceans are never full. It just seems like the sun rises and sets in the same place every day. Nothing ever changes. What's the point? He's associating progress with gain, with advantage. And he's tried a number of things. He's come down to the same conclusion every time. It is vanity. But the word vanity in the Hebrew language here is the word hevel, which means smoke and vapor or mist. I'm sure you're tired of me saying that, but you're going to remember it. You're going to remember it. So hevel, there's 2 ideas of the word hevel. First is that it's fleeting. Life happens fast. It comes at you quickly. It flies by. So he's saying life is like that. Life is like hevel. It flies by. It's here one day, it's gone the next. It's here one instant, it's gone the next. But ultimately, he's driving at the point that hevel means an enigma. It's a mirage. That everything you think brings substance to your life, it's actually fake. It's actually not real at all. It's like a water in the desert. You think you see it, but then the closer you get, the more you realize you don't actually see it. The moment you think you have life figured out, you've got the formula down, is the moment you're farthest away from actually having anything figured out. So last week, he gave us a powerful idea of what it means to listen and obey. When we come to the house of the Lord, when we hear from him, the right response is not to argue or debate or to give our opinion. The right response is obedience. And so now he's going to give us a picture. I think there's 2 reasons why he's doing this next. One is to show us what happens if we don't listen and obey. But secondly, I think he's going to show us why we don't listen and obey. Because there is something pulling for our affection and our trust that he would ultimately call hevel or vapors. Let's get into it. Here's Ecclesiastes 5. Let's go back to verse 8. He's going to begin with an illustration. He's going to set the ground for us to understand what it's like under the sun. He says, if you see in a province the oppression of the poor and the violation of justice and righteousness, you should do something about it. You should picket. You should vote differently. Look what he says. He says, don't be amazed by it. If you see oppression in a province, don't be amazed. Here's why. Because you see, they've got a high official, but he's watched by an even higher official. Then there's an even higher official over the higher official, who's over the high official, who's over the poor workers of the field. What he's saying is, hey, don't be amazed by bureaucratic oppression of the poor. It's been that way. It's the air that we breathe, is what he's saying. Pay attention to it, and here's why in verse 9. Because this is gain for a land, for a nation in every way. Everybody wants a king committed to cultivated fields. So if the question is, what do we gain out of this life? What it means is that humanity is in the pursuit of gain. And what he's saying is where that leads us is to the oppression of the poor in the field. Don't be surprised by it. It's how the world is set up. It's how it's all set up. Everyone is after gain. It's the air that we breathe. And ultimately, it leads to this bureaucracy that oppresses the very workers of the field. That the farther you get away from working in the field, the more oppressive you are. The farther you get away. It's the point he's making. It's a tale as old as time. Don't be surprised by it, he says, because ultimately in verse 9, it's actually what we want. We want a king who is committed to cultivated fields. We want a king, we want a leader, we want a president who is committed to our financial security, don't we? Isn't that why you voted who you voted for? So don't be surprised by it. We all want gain. So when you weigh the candidates, when you see kings in power, don't be surprised. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we all think it's the best thing anyway. We want someone in charge who's going to be committed to the cultivating of fields. So don't be surprised when you see it. We're all in on it. We're all in on it. Don't be surprised by it. Then he's going to get under the issue. And here's what's underneath it, verse 10. You see, he who loves money will not be satisfied, content with money. He who loves silver won't be content, no matter how much silver they get. Nor he who loves wealth or the increase will never be satisfied with their paycheck. If you like getting more, you'll never be satisfied with the little that you do get. It'll never happen. He says this is hevel. So what's underneath the bureaucracy is we're actually never satisfied. We never are. Then he says in verse 11, and here's the issue, when goods increase, it increases those who eat them. Saying, hey, when the fields get more fruitful and people come to eat from your field, you know what you have to do now? You got to plant more crops to have a larger field that you might get more customers. And that is perpetual. That is never ending. You understand that. Remember when you first got married in your house? You remember? Meredith and I got married and we rented a 700 square foot house, which meant that she could not get pregnant in the house. Not because we couldn't fit kids, we couldn't fit pregnant Meredith in the house. That's why. Like our bed took up the whole room. We would not have fit in there. And they were the sweetest times for us. And we could clean the house in like 30 minutes, and that was awesome. And then you're like, no, we need a bigger house. So you get a bigger house, and then you got to clean that house. And then you got to buy furniture to fill the rooms in that house. Have you noticed this happens for you? You're like, no, it'd be better if I have a bigger house. How's that going? Is that better for you? It's back to what I said a few weeks ago. Anytime I see somebody building a house, my first question is, who's going to clean that? Like, who's gonna clean all that square footage? Who's gonna mow all that grass? So he's saying is, so listen, everybody wants more, but when you get more, you gotta add more to keep the more. And it never ends. And he says, and at the end of the day, what happens is the owner, all he has left now is to be proud of the people that are coming. He doesn't even get to eat of his goods anymore. He doesn't get to participate and share in the crops. Now, the only thing he has is, look at all these customers. Which we see, this is what social media is, isn't it? It's look at all the likes I get. That's what he's saying. What advantage has the owner except to be like, oh, we're popular. You don't even get to eat it. And then he continues in verse 12, so sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much. But the full stomach of the rich will not let him sleep. You ever lie awake at night? That's what he's saying is, hey, remember when you didn't have all those cares to worry about? But in your pursuit of wealth, of gain, you've actually increased your cares. Verse 13, he says this line, there is a grievous evil that I've seen under the sun. He'll say it again in chapter 6, verse 1, which is why we're doing this together. I think he's putting two grievous evils next to each other. He's going to show us what happens. What happens when we pursue that? When we pursue the cultivating of a field, when we pursue this perpetual increase, what happens? And here's the first evil. The riches were kept by their owner to his hurt. He hoarded the riches, and those riches were lost in a bad venture. One grievous evil I've seen, Solomon says, is there's a man who acquired a bunch of wealth, and he kept acquiring wealth. And he had one last shot to get even more wealth, but it cost him everything. He had one last business to start, one last slot machine to play. Once I play this, then I'll go home. Whatever it was, and he lost everything. Oh, and he's the father of a son, but now he's got nothing to give to his son as inheritance. It's a man who had esteemed wealth so highly that he thought that's what he gave his life to. And then he said, but I'm going to give it to my son, only to squander it all away and have nothing to give to his son. It's a grievous evil, verse 15, that this son came from his mother's womb, he shall go again. Naked he came out, and he's got nothing from his father, so naked he will return, he'll take nothing with him. It's a grievous evil, he says. Just as he came, so shall he go, the son. And what gain is there? What's the advantage to him who toils for the wind? But it gets worse than that. Moreover, verse 17, all his days he eats in darkness. Darkness is a euphemism for loneliness. He eats all by himself, in much frustration and sickness and anger. He's saying in a world that's oriented around a king committed to cultivating fields, around gain, we begin to buy into the lie, we breathe the air that gain is the point, and not just for me, but for generations to come. But what happens, we've given all of our lives to this income, to the gain, only to have it squandered. What he says is what happens is you end up with no money and no son. Now you've got neither. It's a grievous evil, he says. This man gave his life to this and has now found himself alone, frustrated, sick, and angry. Behold, he continues, and what I've seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun for the few days of his life God's given him. For this is his lot. So what he's saying is the solution then is to not store it all up, but instead use it now. I think he's saying, what if instead of storing money away to give to his son as an inheritance, that he actually spent the money now on his son while he was still alive? What if instead of putting all the money away and trying to give more to his son, instead of making income the point, what if he made relationship the point? What if he enjoyed his wealth in the presence of his son? Wouldn't that have been better? And he continues in whatever verse we're in, 20. It says, for he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. He said, can you imagine? Can you imagine if he just gave himself over to the joy God gave him through his possessions? He wouldn't have even considered how hard it was to get them. That God keeps him occupied with joy, that he delights in it so much that he doesn't hold on to the pain of the toil of his life. And it sounds like Solomon is saying, hey, God can actually give you joy through your possessions and your wealth. Have you ever heard that in church before? Because I grew up believing that wealth was sinful. Anybody else grow up like that? Grew up believing that people who were wealthy must have had to do something sinful to get that money, because God doesn't just give money to people. And here it is, Solomon saying, actually, man, if you got it, enjoy it. Wealth is not shameful. Then he continues, we call it chapter 6, he just continues writing. Verse 1, there's an evil that I've seen under the sun. So now here's the second evil. This one lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. He has everything he's ever wanted in life. He's got it all. But he doesn't have the ability to enjoy them. Instead, a stranger enjoys them. It's hevel, and it's a grievous evil. He says, it's kind of like this. So picture this, he says in verse 3. Picture a man who has 100 children, which sounds awful to me personally. But in this culture, this is a sign of prosperity. You have a bunch of kids, to which some of you are doing a great job. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things. If he has everything he ever wanted in life, so many sons and daughters, wealth and power and prestige and honor, but he can't enjoy good things. Then it says he also has it's a proper burial. No one actually wants to bury him. No one wants to give him a proper burial, which means of the 100 children, none of them want to give him a proper burial. If he has everything he ever wanted in life and is still miserable, so much so that his kids don't even want to give him a proper burial, he said, I think a stillborn child is better off than he. And listen, I don't think there are few things worse than a stillborn child. 9 months, 8 months of hope crushed in an instant. And Solomon is saying, hey, but that stillborn child would be better than a man who lived for thousands of years with hundreds of children who did not enjoy the life God had given to him. And here's why. He says, because this baby comes in vanity but goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered, never has to face any of it. Moreover, hasn't seen the sun, hasn't known any of this toil. And this child, this stillborn baby, finds more rest or peace than the man who had everything he ever wanted. Even though this man should live 1,000 years twice over and yet enjoy no good, he says, but don't they both go to the same place? One never lived, the other one lived a lot and hated it. What's the point? What's the point of a life that's not actually enjoyed? That's what he's asking. All the toil of man, he says in verse 7, is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. We do all of this to make our bellies full, but we're never actually satisfied. We do all the striving and all the working and all the earning and all the selling and all the buying and all the investing. We do all of it, only to never actually be satisfied. So then what advantage does the wise man have over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? So what's the benefit of wisdom or foolishness? What's the benefit of it? Maybe I'm poor, but at least I know how to conduct business. But what's the point? We all go to the same place. So then he arrives at this conclusion in verse 9. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. It's better to feast on what's in front of you than to push that aside in hopes of something better. This is vanity. It's like chasing after the wind. It's better to be present than to always be striving after more, to be chasing the appetite of your belly. Then he wraps it up in verse 10. Because you see, whatever has come to be has already been named. It is known what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. In verse 11, the more words, the more hevel. And what advantage, and what is the advantage to man? So now he's taking us all the way back to chapter 5, verse 7. Do you remember this from last week? That when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity, but God is the one you must fear. So he's taking us back to say, listen, the more you argue with God, the more your life feels like hevel. The more you think you know better how to run your life than God does, the more you feel like your life is meaningless and empty. But look back at verse 10 of chapter 6. Whatever has come to be has already been named. He says, it is what it is. It is what it is. What has come to be has come to be. It is what it is. And it's known what man is. It's always been this way. This is what humanity is like. Then ultimately, at the end of verse 10, he's not able to dispute with one stronger than he. Now, who's the one stronger than he? We learn in context, it's the Lord. So it is what it is. And all of your arguing and theorizing. You ever done the if I win the lottery game? Have you ever played that on a road trip? I just want to say, on behalf of the church, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you for the fake money you're going to give to us. Because you're like, well, first I'll give to the church. Great. We can't wait. We cannot wait for that day to happen. But all of our arguing and theorizing and our disobedience won't change a thing. It is what it is. It's hevel. So watch all your TikToks. Learn from your Instagram reels of all these financial advisors. Do all of it. They just read a book and then got on their phone to tell you all about it. What's the point? It's already been decided. It is what it is, he says, but more important than that is that there's a who behind the what that it is. We know who it is. Look at verse 12. For who knows what is good for man while he lives the first few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? And who can tell man what life will be like after him under the sun? In other words, you don't know what it's going to be like when you're gone. So all of your setting aside for an inheritance, for some promise, some idea that you're not even sure is going to happen. And listen, yes, invest. Yes, have retirement. Yes, all of those things. Be wise in it. But Solomon is making the point, be careful. Be careful. Because if you think that's the point, it will feel like hevel to you. Anybody checked your 401ks recently? You feel good about it? You feel good about what you're leaving behind? Rumor is there's inflation. Have you heard about this thing? So he's saying, just be careful. Be careful. It's vanity to think that we know better than God, or to think that we can plan and prepare for what happens on earth once we die. The truth is you can't, because you don't know. And whatever you want to leave behind, yes, do that. Bless your children. But you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. Is it all going to blow up? We don't know. So the preacher here is revealing the hevel of wealth and honor. And the illustration at the beginning is meant to show us, hey, listen, here's how the world works. It's everywhere under the sun. Bureaucratic oppression is everywhere. Why? Because man is after gain. And when man is after gain, bureaucratic oppression exists. That's why. If that's all we're after, that's where we're going to find it. It's everywhere. It's the air we breathe. But then he says, but here's the problem. We celebrate it. Because we all want a king who's committed to our financial security. So we celebrate it. We love it. And we grow numb to it because it's the air we breathe. Well, no, it's not that bad. I mean, shouldn't I have this? Shouldn't I be able to do that? Sure. But be careful that you aren't celebrating bureaucratic oppression. That's the point that he's making here. It's the air that we breathe. So you made a list earlier. Let me just ask this question. How many of you on that list have something that has to do with finances on your list of things that you're worried or stressed out about? Raise your hand high. Look around. How many of you had something about family on there? You had family? Mm-hmm. The number 2 stressors in life are family and finances. And when you put the two of them together, we can't sleep at night. And Solomon is saying, you want to know why that is? Because you're breathing the air of gain rather than the air of contentment. That's why. Paul wrote a letter in the New Testament to a young preacher boy named Timothy. And it leaves some closing words in the first letter about how to handle a few things. And you know this verse 10, 1 Timothy chapter 6. The love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. Money isn't the root, right? The love of money is. Why? He continues, because it's through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. The danger of the love of gain, of money, is that it pushes us away from faith and into grievous kinds of evil. That's what he's saying. I didn't say it, the Bible says that. And if you pay attention at all in humility, you would 100% agree with it. When our hearts shift towards gain, we will do anything and hurt anyone to get there. But every time I read this, I end up thinking, man, I'm so glad I don't love money, because that sounds awful. Like, I don't love money. Like, I don't care to have a nice car or a big house. I don't care to have a huge bank account. Those things don't matter to me, probably because I was taught sinners have those things, so I try not to have those things. You know, it works. But I want to put this in context. I think you probably have the same thing. Like, man, I don't love money. I know some people that do love money, but it's not me. I don't love it. I love my family. That's what I love. Well, let me put it in context. Here's 1 Timothy 6, verse 6. Godliness with contentment is great gain. That's the advantage. For we have brought nothing into the world, we can't take anything out of it. We just read that in Ecclesiastes. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. Are you? But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. You see, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It's through this craving some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Pay attention. The opposite of the love of money is not the hate of money. It is contentment. The opposite of the love of money is contentment. So let's take off the do you love money question. Let me ask you this question. Are you content with what you have? And if you're not, you love money. Do you see it? It's not that, I hate money, so I'm not going to have any of it. No one says that. It's, are you content with what you do have? And if you are not, friend, you love money. And maybe you're like me, there's a number in my head when it's in my bank account that I feel safe. I feel like we're going to be okay as long as that number. Anybody else have a number? And when that's on your bank account, you feel okay. And the moment that dips below $1, $3, $1,000, when it dips below that, I get stressed out, which tells me something, that I don't have faith in God. I have faith in a number in my bank account. That's what makes me feel content. It reveals my heart that I don't actually trust him. You know what I trust? I trust this number in my bank account. Then we'll be okay. Then we can make it. And if I don't, well, it just reveals to me, you know what? I actually do love money. I do love it. I love it. And it's led to all sorts of evil. And it's revealed to me a discontentment in my heart. Now, I think I have a pretty fleshly, discontented heart already. I just do. I battle it daily. And it has led me into all sorts of evil. What he's saying here, and he says it in Ecclesiastes, is that the danger of a lack of contentment is these two evils. First is that we would hold so tightly to our riches that our discontentment would lead us to a bad venture. Why did a man who had all of that wealth try one more time? Because he wasn't content with what he had. And in not being content with what he had, he lost everything, financially and relationally. Or maybe it's that money is the ultimate. And so what you're going to leave behind for your kids is a financial nest egg. The problem is you've sacrificed relationship with them to get to the financial nest egg. And there's not a child in the world who would say, that's okay. Every time I watch Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner has built this field in his backyard where ghosts of baseball players come to play baseball. It's amazing, except for the ghost part, it's kind of weird, but they come out of the cornfield. But there's this moment where his dad shows up. You remember this? And he says, Dad, you want to have a catch? Every time I start crying. Because every boy, even if he has a baseball field, all he wants is to play catch with his dad. And so the grievous evil of chasing gain is that you may gain the whole point and you lose your soul with it. It's a grievous evil. When we love money, it leads us to that. And we find ourselves alone, frustrated, sick, and angry. Some of you right now are worried you're not going to have anything to leave behind for your kids. Listen to me. They'll get over it. Go see them. Go hug them. Go take them some Chick-fil-A and have lunch together. Go play with the grandbabies. The money you think you are leaving them behind is going to be wasted on something they're going to sell at a yard sale anyway. You know what they need? They need a hug from their dad. They need grandma to come hold the kids so mom and dad can go out to dinner. The second evil in Ecclesiastes 6 is that we might have everything we ever wanted in life, but no way to enjoy it. Our pursuit of gain would lead us there. That in our greed, we've lost our family, we've lost our honor. No one even wants to come to our funeral. And you have the house, and you got the lake house, and you got the beach house, you got the mountain house, you got the jet skis, you got the big blob in the lake for the kids to jump on, everything your kids and grandkids could ever want, only to never actually give them what they ever really needed. And the great vanity, the hevel of all of this, is that we do all this working and striving and earning to bet it on some sort of future that we're not even sure is going to exist, that we have no idea what will happen. But the comfort, the point Solomon is making in Ecclesiastes is, we do know someone who does know what's going to happen. Look at Ecclesiastes 6:10. Whatever has come to be has already been named. It's known what man is, that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. So here's the point Solomon is making is, hey, listen, what if there's a bigger plan at work in all of this? What if, go with me here, what if God is at work in both your poverty and in your wealth? What if all of that is on purpose? What if your boring suburb, Ola, middle-class life is exactly what God had in mind for you? And I know, right, you're gonna move to New York City and be a famous YouTuber, I get it. But you're not going to. Because what if this is what God had for you? Right, like, what if God's in charge? That's the point he's making. It is what it is. What if we were created exactly for this? The word the preacher keeps using is lot. This was their lot, is the point he's making. We talked about it a few weeks ago. It's like, it's what you've been given as an inheritance. This is your land. So we talked in Psalm 139, you've been created exactly how he meant to create you. There's no mistakes. The skills you've been given, the gifts you've been given, the way your mind works, all of that was on purpose. But even more than that, we talked about Acts chapter 17. Paul's arguing with philosophers at Areopagus. And he says that God, this is verse 26, made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined the allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. So let me ask you this question. What if God is behind your financial status? What if God's in charge of that? I know you made some great investments, and so now you're in charge of it. I'm just curious who told you to invest there. Don't say it out loud, you go to prison. But if God told you, maybe, right? No, I made some really bad financial decisions, so I ended up here. Okay, all right. Is God big enough to be in charge of that? That's what I'm asking you. Do you believe that he actually could be? Because that's how we ended up here, isn't it? Because finances determine a lot of things. Your finances determined what house you could afford, which determined what neighborhood you would live in, which determined what school your kids would go to. It determined what kind of car you would buy, what dealership you'd have to go to buy that car. It determined where you shop. It determines where you buy groceries, doesn't it? It should. It does. So what if God's actually in charge of all of that? What if God gave you the financial status you have because that's the only way to get you into the neighborhood that you're in? Because if you had the financial status you wish you had, and you were gonna do a fixer-upper somewhere in Waco, Texas, he wouldn't have got you over here. But instead, you don't have any money. And so 10 years ago, you could afford a house in Ola. And so he moved you here. What if God's in charge of that? Then you ask, well, why? Like, why would he do that? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Paul would tell us in verse 27 that people would seek God. And perhaps they would feel their way toward him and find him because he's not actually far from each one of us. And why? Why isn't God far from each one of us? How is that true? How was God not far from you when you came to know Jesus? You wanna know how he wasn't far from you? Because there were Christians who were close to you and they were the presence of God in your life. That's how. You think you just stumbled upon the gospel? No, man. God planted somebody in your school or at your workplace. God did that. And he used their financial status to get them there too. Do you see it? So what if it's not a coincidence? And what if we're not in charge? What if it is what it is? And what Solomon is saying, and what Paul is saying, is we should actually be content with that. Because your very presence in your neighborhood and in your school and your workplace and that grocery store is how God is not far from your neighbors and your classmates and your coworkers and that clerk at Publix. You understand that? That's how God does it. That's his plan. His plan was to send us out in these random places all around the globe that people might feel their way toward God. They realize, oh, I'm not that far from him. Well, how do you know? Well, I got this neighbor. Well, how do you know? Well, this guy keeps coming to my lane at Publix. That's how I know. Like, what if God's in it? What if he's orchestrated all of it? But the more we walk around miserable and frustrated and angry by our finances, what are you telling people about God? That he's only good if you're wealthy? That he's only good if you have the next thing? What if he's good because you have what you have? Then what? What if he's good because you have children to love? What if he's good because you have an air conditioner? What if he's good because you have an '08 Toyota Sequoia with a dent in the front fender? What if that's true? What if he's good? Because the truth is, you will see and interact with people I never will. Like, I'll probably never sit in a board meeting with multimillionaires and billionaires. Probably never will. But some of you will. Why? That they might feel their way toward God and realize that they're not far from him. I may never have to sit in line to get food stamps or to wait for public transportation, but some of you will. Why? Because there's somebody there who needs to know that God is not very far from them. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe God's in charge of it. Maybe your kid's in public school because that's what God had for you. Maybe you can't afford private school because that's what God wants. Maybe you can afford the prestigious private schools. And I know you think it's to get them out of this godforsaken world. That's fine. But what if it's bigger than that? What if there are families there that only you can interact with? Because for some reason, your wealth and honor carries weight for them, and you can have a conversation that I never could. Do you see it? So what's the response? If God's in it, if God's orchestrated all of it, the only right response is contentment with great joy. That's the right response. It's to be content. And I don't mishear me and say, well, then I need to be extremely frugal. I need to be extravagantly foolish with my money. No. Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying you just got to be fine with it. That's what I'm saying. Case in our middle child, it's great. Like, there are times with dinner when it's like, what's for dinner? And if we say one of the things that he likes, his response is, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Which don't you love that? I love that. Yeah, all right. So what if it was, hey, you're really wealthy. Yeah, I'm fine with that. You've lost your car, you got to take public transportation. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like, what if we were actually fine with it? What if we weren't trying to climb things and get out of things, but we're actually just content with where God has us? What if we enjoyed that? What would that do for the world? And for me, I find such great freedom in that. Because my problem is, I think my financial state is my fault. Anybody else? But what if God uses my faults for the glory of his kingdom? What if he does? What if your debt, yeah, you should pay that off, yes. But what if he did that to put you in front of people? What if he did that to put you in an FPU class in front of people that need to know the gospel? So then what do we do with all of it? Well, Paul tells Timothy in chapter 6, verse 17, as for the rich in this present age, and just to be clear, that's all of us. Like, if you've got a car and you've got air conditioning and a bed, you're richer than 98% of the world. We're doing fine. We're doing fine. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty. Don't think you've done it. You didn't earn that. You didn't achieve that. This is God. Or to set your hopes on the uncertainty of riches. Instead, to set your hopes on God, who richly provides us with everything to do what? To enjoy. So listen, don't be ashamed that you enjoy what God's given you. If God's given you a boat on the lake, you better enjoy that for the rest of us. Don't act miserable. It only makes me feel miserable. Love that thing, man. Go after church. Go. Get on the boat. Take friends skiing and tubing. Invite your pastor along. Do that. Like, I think that's the right thing to do. If he's richly blessed you, goodness gracious, what a gift. Enjoy it. Don't be ashamed of it. And he continues, but to do good, Be rich in good works. Be generous. Be ready to share. Because when you do that, you store up for yourself treasures as a good foundation for the future, because then you can take hold of what life actually is like. It's not hevel. There's purpose and meaning to it. Well, what about the rest of us? Like, what if I don't have a boat? Well, then what do I do? Well, Paul wrote a letter to the church at Philippi, and there's churches who are trying to help him out. Like, he's not in a great place financially, and he's been in and out of prison. And he writes to them in verse 11 of chapter 4, and he says, I've learned, whatever situation I'm in, to be content. I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. I know how to be brought high or to be wealthy. In any and every circumstance, I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can exist in both of those places. You're like, man, well, how? How can you do that, Paul? Paul says, because I can do all things to Christ who strengthens me. But I thought that was about scoring touchdowns and dunking a basketball. How could that verse be about this? That's what it's about. It's not, I can fly because Christ strengthens me. No, man. You know how hard it is to be content? It's so hard, the only way to do it is through Christ who strengthens you. It's the only way. Let's go back. The air we breathe is bureaucratic oppression, and we buy into it because we want a king committed to the cultivating of fields. The only way out of that stream is through Christ who strengthens you. It's the only way out. So if you're tired enough yet of the rat race, if you're tired enough of always trying to achieve and get to the next status and the next thing or get out of this, I want to invite you to learn what it is to be content in all circumstances and situations. You can only do it through Christ. He strengthens you. It's only in him. It's only in him. This past Friday was Kaysen's birthday, and Miss Donna sent out a message on our staff group text that one way they needed some help with ProPresenter with their screens for worship. And I don't like that I know how to do it because then people ask me to do it. But I know how to do stuff because I was a youth pastor in the 90s, early 2000s. I know how to do those things. So we're coming back from getting pizza for Kaysen's birthday. And I'm like, hey, buddy, we got to stop by the church real quick. Mr. Brad needs our help. And he was like, on my birthday? And I was like, how come you can't just be fine with that now? Can you just be fine with it? I'm fine with it. So we pull up here. I'm like, hey, why don't you come in with me? Like maybe Tram will be inside and we'll come in. So I come in and I can't remember how to fix it. Ultimately, we get it fixed. And there's a guy at One Way who always has mints and Tic Tacs. He's known as Tic Tac Tim. That's what he's known as. Which I just love that, right? So he's coming up and he's just happy. He's joyful. Case and I are back at the sound booth and he just puts Tic Tac boxes on the counter. Because what Tic Tac Tim does is that he gives you Tic Tacs. That's why his nickname is Tic Tac Tim, if you weren't catching on. And he's like, hey, why don't you and your son grab one? And Kaysen's like, I can get one of these? So Kaysen grabs one and I grab a box. And we go out to the car. And Kaysen's like, man, you know what, Dad? He's like, that was worth it. I'm like, yeah, dude, you get it, right? Like you come to serve and people are joyful. It's like, because I got Tic Tacs. He starts shaking his Tic Tac box. But what I love about Tic Tac Tim is that what he has to give, he gives generously and joyfully. Right? Like he's not of some great financial means where he can just hand stuff out. You know what he can't hand out? Is Tic Tacs. And he made my son's day. Because he's content, right? This is what I have. This is my lot. So I'm gonna be generous with it. Whoever I come across. And there are people probably who have been given a box of Tic Tacs whose life has been changed on that day because they needed something from someone to let them know God was not far from them. So here's where we're going this morning. Can you just be content? Can you just be okay with it? Be fine with where you are? Because maybe this good, sovereign creator actually knows what he's doing. And all of our desires to get wealthy fast, be financially independent, great things. Yes, absolutely. Do it if you want to. But be careful, because the danger is that a love of money leads to all sorts of evil. And maybe the call is to just be content with where we are. Because for some of us, what God called us to do last week, our response was, yeah, but I don't think I can afford that. Well, maybe you got your answer. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I want us just to consider where our contentment lies today. And I told you, like my soul, I'm naturally in my flesh discontented. So there are a number of practical things that I had to do to make sure I wasn't chasing things. So I had to get off of social media because it was making me discontent. I would see things that I wanted to be, places I wanted to be, people I wanted to be like. I wasn't content with me. Certain shows I can't watch anymore, not because they're evil, but because they make me desire things that I don't need to desire. So for some of you, like home improvement shows are sowing a seed of discontent in your heart for the house that you do have. And I know it feels innocuous, but it's not. It's the reels you watch on Instagram, it's the TikToks you watch, music you listen to. Godliness with contentment is the point. That's the great gain. And I just have to believe that God's so good, so powerful, and so smart. He's put it all together on purpose. So maybe you would pray today that he would give you a contented heart through Christ Jesus, that you might see the neighbors in front of you, the people at the grocery store, people on your kids' team. Maybe you'd see them as trying to feel their way toward God, and you're the one to let them know he's not far from them. Maybe God's in charge of all of it. Wouldn't that be cool? So God, we, you know our hearts. Like, you know how prone we are to wander after the appetite of our belly instead to feast on what's right in front of us. But you've given us so much to be grateful for. So would you open up our eyes to it today? That we wouldn't see the imperfections where we are, but instead we'd see the gift that you've given us in it. Would you be so kind as to give us the ability to enjoy it? That enjoyment might draw people to your heart. If there's anyone here today who's discontent with their life because they aren't finding it in you, would you draw them to you? That you're the only place contentment is found.